The sun was beating down on the affluent streets of Hawthorne Estates when the wail of sirens shattered the afternoon quiet. A man in a faded t-shirt was about to be violently pinned in his own front yard for the simple crime of existing while black. But the officers eagerly slapping the cuffs on his wrists had absolutely no idea they had just detained the one man who could dismantle their entire careers with a single phone call. Anthony Caldwell was a man who appreciated the quiet. At 54 years old, with 30 decades of high-stakes law enforcement under his belt, silence was a luxury he rarely afforded himself. As the Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal for the district, his days were dictated by the chaotic, the dangerous, and the desperate. He commanded task forces, coordinated multi-state fugitive manhunts, and operated in the darkest corners of the criminal underworld. But today was a Tuesday, and Anthony was on vacation. He was standing on the pristine emerald-green lawn of a sprawling mid-century modern home in Hawthorne Estates, an ultra-exclusive suburb that boasted zero-crime, highly funded schools and an unspoken, rigid demographic uniformity. Anthony had just closed on the property 3 days prior. It was a gift for his daughter Sarah, who was returning home from medical school with her husband. He wanted them to have a safe, beautiful place to start their family. Dressed in a pair of faded grey sweatpants, a well-worn navy athletic t-shirt and scuffed sneakers, Anthony looked nothing like the sharp, suit-clad federal executive who commanded rooms in the federal courthouse. He held a clipboard in one hand and a tape measure in the other, calculating the dimensions for a new front porch railing. He was relaxed. He was happy. Across the street, peering through the pristine slats of her custom plantation blinds, was Brenda Carmichael. Brenda was the self-appointed guardian of Hawthorne Estates, a woman who treated the neighborhood watch like a paramilitary organization. To Brenda, the sight of a tall, broad-shouldered black man in worn-out clothes walking around the vacant Miller property was not just suspicious. It was a 5-alarm emergency. She didn't see the clipboard. She didn't see the relaxed demeanor. She saw a threat. Within 3 minutes of Brenda's frantic 911 call, reporting a large, aggressive-looking prowler casing a vacant home, a local police cruiser tore around the corner of Elmwood Drive, its lights flashing violently against the manicured oaks. Anthony heard the tires screech before he saw the car. He turned slowly, lowering his tape measure. A seasoned veteran of the badge, Anthony's instincts immediately assessed the situation. He recognized the aggressive angle at which the cruiser parked, deliberately blocking the driveway to cut off any avenue of escape. The doors flew open, and 2 officers stepped out. Officer Thomas Jenkins was a 15-year veteran of the local force, with a reputation that preceded him, a man who wore his badge not as a shield, but as a weapon. He was thick-necked, red-faced, and his hand was already resting heavily on the butt of his sidearm. Emerging from the passenger side was Officer Brian Miller, a fresh-faced rookie barely out of his 20s, who looked nervously between his senior partner and the man on the lawn. "Hey, you drop what's in your hands. Right now!" Jenkins barked, his voice echoing off the quiet suburban facades. He advanced quickly, his posture aggressive and tense. Anthony didn't flinch. He didn't make any sudden movements. He knew exactly how these situations spiraled out of control. With slow, deliberate precision, he tossed the tape measure and the clipboard onto the grass. "Officers," Anthony said, his voice deep, calm, and resonant. "Is there a problem?" "I said hands where I can see them. Step away from the house," Jenkins yelled, unholstering his taser and pointing it squarely at Anthony's chest. "My hands are clearly visible, officer," Anthony replied, keeping his palms open and raised to shoulder height. He didn't raise his voice, but there was an unmistakable undercurrent of authority in his tone. "I am the owner of this property. I just bought it. I'm taking measurements for a contractor." Jenkins let out a harsh, disbelieving scoff. He closed the distance, stopping just a few feet away, his eyes scanning Anthony with undisguised contempt. Yeah, right. You bought a $2 million house in Hawthorne Estates, and I'm the King of England. Turn around, face the house, interlace your fingers behind your head. Officer Miller hesitated, lingering near the cruiser. Tom, maybe we should just get his ID first. Shut up, Miller. I know a burglar when I see one. Jenkins snapped without taking his eyes off Anthony. Turn around now, before I light you up. Anthony's jaw tightened. He had trained thousands of officers in tactical de-escalation. He had drafted use-of-force policies adopted by police departments across the country. He was watching a masterclass in everything a police officer was explicitly trained not to do. Jenkins was escalating a non-violent, non-threatening encounter based entirely on his own prejudiced assumptions. Officer Jenkins. Anthony began catching sight of the name tag on the man's chest. How do you know my name? Jenkins interrupted his face, flushing a deeper shade of red. You've been watching us. You've been casing the neighborhood. It's on your uniform, Anthony said, evenly suppressing a sigh. Listen to me very carefully. My wallet is in my back right pocket. My identification is inside, including the deed to this house, which I have folded in my back left pocket. If you allow me to reach for it, we can clear this up immediately. You're not reaching for anything, pal, Jenkins sneered. He holstered his taser, stepping forward and violently grabbing Anthony by the left shoulder, spinning him around with unnecessary force. Spread your legs. Anthony complied. He could have easily resisted. He had a black belt in Krav Maga and had subdued men twice Jenkins's size in active war zones and cartel safehouses. But Anthony was playing a different game now. He was letting Jenkins dig his own grave. You're making a catastrophic mistake, officer, Anthony said softly, staring straight ahead at the freshly painted front door of his daughter's new home. The only mistake made here was you thinking you could come to this neighborhood and steal from decent people. Jenkins hissed into Anthony's ear as he kicked Anthony's legs further apart. Across the street, a few other neighbors had emerged, standing on their manicured lawns, watching the spectacle with a mix of curiosity and validation. Brenda Carmichael stood on her porch, her arms crossed, a smug smile of satisfaction playing on her lips. She had protected her neighborhood. The indignity of the search was familiar to Anthony, though not from this side of the law. Jenkins patted him down with aggressive, rough hands, purposely jabbing his thumbs into Anthony's ribs and pulling tightly at the waistband of his sweatpants. Nothing in his waistband, Jenkins called back to Miller. Check the perimeter, see if he dropped any tools or a weapon. I told you I am the homeowner. Anthony repeated his voice, dropping an octave, radiating a cold, hard warning. You are currently detaining me without reasonable suspicion, violating my Fourth Amendment rights, and bordering on assault under color of law. Jenkins paused, letting out a dark chuckle. Oh, we got a jailhouse lawyer here. Let me guess you read a book in County Shut Your Mouth. Suddenly Jenkins grabbed Anthony's wrists, yanking them forcefully behind his back. The cold steel of the handcuffs bit brutally into Anthony's skin. Jenkins didn't bother to check the spacing. He squeezed the cuffs down tight, ensuring the metal clamped directly onto the bone. It was a classic intimidation tactic designed to cause maximum discomfort. Anthony gritted his teeth as a sharp pain shot up his forearms. The cuffs are too tight, he stated objectively. Loosen them. They're not meant to be comfortable, they're meant to keep criminals contained, Jenkins retorted, locking the cuffs with a sharp click. Now walk, move. Jenkins shoved Anthony forward. It was a hard, intentional push, meant to throw Anthony off balance. Anthony stumbled slightly on the grass, but quickly caught his footing, maintaining his dignity as he was paraded back toward the cruiser. By now a small crowd had formed. The neighborhood landscapers had paused their mowers. A jogger had stopped on the sidewalk. Everyone was watching the black man in sweatpants being marched away in irons. "Look at this," Jenkins boasted to his rookie partner as they reached the hood of the police car. Jenkins slammed Anthony chest first against the scorching hot metal of the hood. The summer sun had baked the cruiser, and the heat radiated through Anthony's thin t-shirt. "Caught him red-handed. These guys think they can just walk into our neighborhoods in broad daylight." Miller looked uneasy. He approached Anthony cautiously. "Hey man, look. If you just tell us what you were doing here, maybe we can figure this out." "I have told you," Anthony said, turning his head slightly to look the young officer in the eye. "I own the house. My name is Anthony Caldwell. My ID is in my back pocket. I highly suggest you retrieve it, Officer Miller, because your partner has just stepped on a landmine, and you are currently standing right next to him." Jenkins laughed loudly, a grating, arrogant sound. "A landmine? Are you threatening an officer of the law? Now add that to the charges. Resisting arrest, prowling, making terroristic threats." "I am not threatening you," Anthony replied, his voice chillingly calm. The contrast between Jenkins's frantic, angry energy and Anthony's absolute stillness was stark. "I am stating a fact. You have bypassed every standard operating procedure your department has. You failed to investigate, you escalated to force without provocation, and you have unlawfully detained a citizen. You are operating entirely on racial bias, Officer Jenkins, and it is going to cost you your badge." Jenkins's face darkened. His ego was fragile, and Anthony's lack of fear was infuriating him. He leaned in close, his breath smelling of stale coffee and chewing tobacco. "Listen to me, boy. Out here, I am the law. I don't care how big you think you are or what smart words you know. You're going to the precinct, you're getting booked, and you're going to sit in a cell until I decide you can make a phone call." "Check his pocket, Tom," Miller urged, clearly rattled by Anthony's calm demeanor. "Just get his ID so we can run him. Dispatch is asking for a status update." "Fine," Jenkins grunted. He roughly shoved his hand into Anthony's back right pocket, yanking out the leather wallet. It wasn't a standard bifold wallet. It was heavy. It was a federal credentials case. Jenkins didn't notice the weight or the texture at first. He was too busy looking around the street, puffing his chest out for the audience of wealthy neighbors who were watching him protect their streets. He flipped the leather case open with one hand. "All right, Mr. Caldwell, let's see just how long your rap sheet." Jenkins stopped. The words died in his throat. The swagger vanished from his posture in a fraction of a second, replaced by a sudden, rigid paralysis. There, gleaming brightly under the afternoon sun, was not a driver's license. It was a solid gold badge, heavily engraved, featuring the magnificent eagle of the United States government. The words stamped across the top were unmistakable, even to a small-town patrol cop. Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal directly opposite the badge was Anthony's federal identification card. It bore his photograph, the exact same face, currently pressed against the hood of the car, along with his clearance level, his title, and the official seal of the Department of Justice. Jenkins stared at the credentials. His brain seemed to short-circuit, unable to process the impossibility of what he was looking at. He blinked once, twice, hoping the heat was playing tricks on his eyes. But the gold badge remained glaring back at him like a physical blow. "Tom," Miller asked, noticing his partner's sudden statue-like stillness. "Tom, what is it? What does it say? Does he have warrants?" Jenkins swallowed hard. His throat was completely dry. His hands, which moments ago had been so strong and violent, began to tremble uncontrollably. The wallet felt like a block of burning coal in his palm. Anthony turned his head, resting his cheek against the warm hood of the cruiser. He looked at Jenkins, a cold, calculating fire burning in his eyes. "Read it out loud," "Officer Jenkins," Anthony commanded softly. "Read it so your partner can hear. Read it so the whole neighborhood can hear exactly who you just assaulted." The silence that fell over the meticulously manicured lawn of Hawthorne Estates was absolute. It was the kind of heavy, suffocating quiet that precedes a devastating storm. Officer Thomas Jenkins stood frozen, staring at the solid gold star and the federal seal inside the leather credential case. The aggressive flush of anger that had painted his face a deep crimson was rapidly draining away, replaced by an ashen, sickly pallor. The leather wallet, which had felt like a trophy just seconds before, now felt like a live grenade in his hands. "Tom!" Officer Brian Miller stepped closer, his voice cracking with the nervous tension that was thick in the humid air. He leaned over his partner's rigid shoulder to look at the ID. Miller's eyes went wide. The young rookie visibly recoiled, taking 2 rapid steps backward, as if the police cruiser itself had caught fire. "Oh my God!" Miller breathed out the blood rushing from his face. "Tom, he's a chief deputy. He's a federal marshal." The murmurs from the neighbors who had gathered at the edge of their driveways like spectators at a gladiator match suddenly hushed. Brenda Carmichael, standing on her porch across the street, squinted her eyes trying to make out what had caused the 2 officers to suddenly turn into terrified statues. "Well, Officer Jenkins." Anthony Caldwell's voice sliced through the silence. He was still pressed against the sweltering hood of the police cruiser, his hands agonizingly cuffed behind his back, but his tone held the undeniable command of a man sitting at the head of a boardroom. "You were about to list my rap sheet. Please don't keep the audience waiting." Jenkins swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing erratically. The bravado that had defined him his entire career had completely evaporated, leaving behind a terrified hollow shell. I, he stammered, his tough guy facade crumbling into dust. Frantically, Jenkins shoved the leather wallet back into Anthony's pocket and fumbled with his utility belt, his thick fingers desperately searching for his handcuff keys. "Sir, there's been a misunderstanding. A terrible misunderstanding. Let me just get these off you and we can step away from me." Anthony's command was not a shout, but the sheer force and absolute authority behind the words made Jenkins physically flinch. Jenkins froze, the small silver key trembling in his hand. "Sir, please." Jenkins pleaded, his voice a pathetic whisper compared to his earlier roars. "Let me take the cuffs off. We're just doing our jobs, following up on a suspicious person call. You understand how it is." "I understand exactly how it is." "Officer Jenkins," Anthony replied smoothly, finally pushing himself off the scorching hood of the cruiser and turning around. He stood tall, towering over the older cop, despite the metal biting into his wrists. "I understand that you approached a homeowner on his own property, refused to state reasonable suspicion, ignored my attempts to provide identification, physically assaulted me, and placed me in restraints, all because of the color of my skin." No, that's not." Jenkins began, his eyes darting around, wildly looking for an escape that didn't exist. "Officer Miller," Anthony said, cutting Jenkins off effortlessly and locking eyes with the rookie. "Yes, sir," Miller stammered, automatically standing at attention. "Get on your radio. I want your watch commander, your precinct captain, and the chief of police down here. Immediately," Anthony ordered. "And tell them they have a federal executive officer unlawfully detained in handcuffs at..." Anthony glanced at the street sign. 442 Elmwood Drive. "Sir, please, there's no need to ruin my career over a simple mistake." Jenkins begged, his panic now fully blinding him. He reached out again, trying to grab Anthony's arms to force the cuffs off. Anthony shifted his weight, pivoting away with practiced agility, leaving Jenkins grasping at empty air. Do not touch me again, Anthony warned, his voice dropping to a low, lethal register. If you lay another hand on me, I will consider it an assault on a federal officer, and I will put you on the ground. Am I understood? Jenkins shrunk back, utterly defeated. He looked at Miller, who had already drawn his radio to his mouth. Dispatch, this is Unit 4, Bravo. Miller said, his voice shaking so badly he had to repeat himself. We need a supervisor to our location. Code 3. And... Dispatch, notify Captain Pendleton and Chief Bradley. Tell them we have a situation involving a Chief U.S. Marshal. The power shift. Time elapsed 6 minutes since the 911 call. Jenkins's status, psychologically broken, facing catastrophic career failure. Anthony's status, cuffed, physically uncomfortable, but in absolute, unquestionable control of the narrative and the legal high ground. For the next 12 minutes, Hawthorne Estates was treated to an agonizing tableau. Anthony stood calmly on his front lawn, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. He did not ask for water. He did not complain about the cuffs. He let the visual of a black federal executive in sweatpants, handcuffed in front of his newly purchased multi-million-dollar home, burn itself into the memory of every neighbor watching. Brenda Carmichael had slowly migrated from her porch to the edge of her driveway. She clutched her pearl necklace, her mouth slightly agape, as she watched the aggressive prowler she had reported stand in quiet defiance, while the officers who responded looked like men waiting for their executioners. The distant wail of multiple sirens began to echo through the affluent streets. They grew louder, multiplying until the quiet neighborhood was suddenly flooded with flashing red and blue lights. 2 unmarked black SUVs and 3 standard patrol cruisers tore around the corner, aggressively braking and swarming the street in front of Anthony's property. The doors flew open, and a wave of brass stepped out. Leading the charge was Chief of Police William Bradley, a stern-faced man in a crisp white uniform shirt adorned with stars. Trailing close behind him was Captain Arthur Pendleton. Both men looked frantic, their eyes sweeping the scene until they locked onto the tall man standing handcuffed on the grass. Chief Bradley's jaw dropped. He had known Anthony Caldwell for 7 years. They had served together on the Joint Regional Fugitive Task Force, sharing coffee at ungodly hours during multi-agency raids. He knew Anthony's reputation, his unyielding integrity, and his immense power within the Department of Justice. Anthony. Chief Bradley practically sprinted across the lawn, his face a mask of absolute horror. Jesus Christ, Anthony, what the hell is going on here? Bradley spun around his fury, instantly, locking onto Jenkins, who looked like he was about to vomit. Jenkins, unlock those cuffs right now. What is the matter with you? Hold on, Bill, Anthony said, calmly, his voice echoing over the idling engines of the police cruisers. Don't touch the cuffs. They stay on. Bradley stopped in his tracks, utterly bewildered. Anthony, please. Let us get those off you. This is a massive mistake. It's not a mistake, Bill. It is a symptom. Anthony stated, his eyes sweeping over the assembled brass. For the last 30 minutes, I have been detained without cause, physically assaulted, and unlawfully searched by your officer. Chief, he looked like a burglar. Jenkins blurted out, a desperate, pathetic attempt at self-preservation. We got a call about a prowler. He wouldn't cooperate. Quiet. Captain Pendleton roared, his face purple with rage. You do not speak, Jenkins. You do not say another word. Anthony turned to face Jenkins, his expression shifting from calm restraint to an icy, predatory focus. It was the twist Jenkins never saw coming. You thought you were just bullying a random homeowner, Anthony said, his voice carrying clearly to the gathered neighbors. You thought you could racially profile a man in a rich neighborhood, slap cuffs on him, and humiliate him to stroke your own ego. What you didn't know, Officer Jenkins, is why I actually chose to buy a house in this specific jurisdiction." Chief Bradley stiffened. He knew that tone. It was the tone Anthony used when he was closing a trap. "The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division has been secretly looking into the Hawthorne Estates Police Department for the past 14 months. Anthony revealed the bombshell dropping like an anvil on the assembled officers. "We had statistical anomalies, a bizarrely high rate of use of force incidents against minorities during routine traffic stops and suspicious person calls. But we needed undeniable first-hand evidence of the institutional rot." Jenkins's knees visibly buckled. He leaned against the cruiser to keep from collapsing. "I bought this house for my daughter," Anthony continued softly. "But I also knew moving in here would be the ultimate litmus test for your department. I told the investigators I wanted to see how long it would take for your men to target me." Anthony looked at his watch, an expensive timepiece glinting against his cuffed wrist. "I took ownership 3 days ago. I was standing in my yard for exactly 12 minutes today before you assaulted me, Jenkins. You didn't just end your own career today. You just handed the federal government the golden key to put your entire precinct under a federal consent decree." The silence that followed was deafening. The sheer magnitude of what Anthony was saying settled over the officers. Jenkins hadn't just messed up a call. He had validated a federal investigation and doomed the autonomy of his entire police force. Chief Bradley looked completely defeated. He turned to Captain Pendleton. "Strip him!" Bradley ordered softly. "Sir," Pendleton asked, "strip him of his badge and his weapon. Right now." Bradley commanded, his voice rising in volume. "Officer Jenkins, you are suspended immediately without pay, pending termination and federal civil rights charges. Turn around and put your hands on the hood of the car." The irony was poetic and brutal. Jenkins, shaking violently, unbuckled his gun belt and handed it to the captain. Then, sobbing quietly, he turned and placed his hands on the exact same hood where he had violently slammed Anthony just 20 minutes prior. Officer Miller was ordered to place the handcuffs on his own senior partner. "Bill," Anthony said softly. "Yes, Anthony," the chief replied, looking like he had aged 10 years in 5 minutes. "You can take the cuffs off me now." Chief Bradley stepped forward himself, producing a key and unlocking the tight metal restraints. Anthony brought his arms forward, rubbing the deep red indentations on his wrists. He didn't complain. He just rolled his shoulders, restoring his circulation. At that moment, a sleek silver sedan pulled into the driveway, slipping past the blockade of police cruisers. The doors opened, and a beautiful young woman in her late 20s stepped out, followed by a tall, athletic man. It was Anthony's daughter, Sarah, and her husband, Connor. Sarah took one look at the flashing lights, the handcuffed police officer, and her father rubbing his wrists, and she froze. "Dad!" Sarah called out, rushing across the grass with Connor right behind her. "Dad, what happened? Are you okay?" Anthony's hard federal agent demeanor melted instantly. The icy predator vanished, replaced by the warm, loving father. He smiled warmly, stepping forward to wrap his daughter in a tight embrace. "I'm perfectly fine, sweetheart," Anthony said, kissing the top of her head. He reached into his back pocket, pulling out a set of shiny new brass keys. He pressed them into her palm. "Just a little misunderstanding with the welcoming committee," Anthony said, glancing over Sarah's shoulder at the disgraced Officer Jenkins being loaded into the back of a squad car. He looked back down at his daughter, his eyes shining with profound satisfaction. "But I think we've got the neighborhood watch completely sorted out. Welcome to your new home." Across the street, Brenda Carmichael silently retreated into her house, pulling her custom plantation blinds tightly shut. But Anthony knew, and the entire Hawthorne Estates Police Department knew, that things in this neighborhood would never ever be the same again. The sun continued to shine down on the immaculate lawns, but the shadows had been irreversibly exposed to the light. The Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal had not just claimed his property, he had claimed justice. If this story of absolute karma and the ultimate twist of justice kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. Have you ever witnessed someone's ego get instantly shattered by reality? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to share this incredible story with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more thrilling, real-life dramas delivered every single week. Stay safe, stay just, and we'll see you in the next video.